Once upon a time, Ford was one of the dominant players in the compact pickup truck segment with the Ranger. Now, the Ranger nameplate has had a very long history for Ford here in America, so it was a pretty big shocker when the company decided to kill off the Ranger name back in 2011. Now, as you guys know, the compact truck segment has really changed. It's evolved into a mid-sized truck segment, so Ford has decided to bring back the Ranger nameplate for 2019. And today, I'm just outside of Seattle, Washington, with the rest of the members of the Automotive Video Association for our annual spring run event, and I finally got my hands on the 2019 Ranger XLT. But the big question I want answered, does this new 2019 model have what it takes to steal back the sales crown from the Toyota Tacoma? That's what we're here to find out. So although we haven't seen the Ranger nameplate here in America for 8 years, when Ford killed off the Ranger here, they actually introduced an all-new T6 version to the rest of the world. And this is basically that same truck. So even though it's all new here in America, we're essentially getting a truck that's about 7 years old. Now, Ford did make some changes to the Ranger when they brought the vehicle over to the States. Mainly it has to do with the overall front fascia and the bumpers to comply with the more strict US crash test regulations. But as you can see, the front design of the Ranger definitely has a very baby F-150 look to it with some European influence to the truck. You can see my tester is the mid-level XLT trim. You can take your pick between XL, XLT, and Lariat. It comes with halogen headlights, not even an LED running light. You literally have halogen low and high beams, halogen turn signals, and then halogen fog lights here at the bottom. The XLT rolls in the fog lights. I think the truck looks a little bit cheap, if I'm being honest. You have to get the Lariat trim to get full LED headlights. Now, I will say that this compact truck segment, it's very rare to find LED headlights. Really only the 2020 Tacoma offers it, the Ridgeline, and the new Jeep Gladiator. And you can see the grille is a little bit on the smaller end. Usually Ford puts massive grills on their trucks. It gives the Ranger a much cleaner, somewhat less in-your-face look to it. I really like it in this saber exterior color, this bright orange, which definitely shows off the lines of the Ranger pretty well. Now, the previous generation Ranger was a lot smaller than today's mid-sized truck segments, and this new version definitely had to grow to compensate for just how much bigger this segment has gotten. Its wheelbase at around 127 inches long is the same whether you guys go for the Super Cab or this longer Super Crew, where Ford will just shrink the bed to a 5-foot bed on this one. Its overall length at 212 inches long is also about 8 inches longer than the previous generation Ranger, but about 6 to 8 inches shorter than something like the new Jeep Gladiator. But this is roughly around the same size as a Toyota Tacoma if you guys go for a crew cab with the smaller bed. Now, the wheels, you can see on this particular one, they're an 18-inch wheel with kind of this like machine gray pocket finish. Ford offers a plethora of wheel options. These are an optional wheel that's part of the FX4 off-road package with the raised lettering. I think it looks fairly nice. The Ranger, as you guys know, with most trucks, has an independent front suspension and then a live axle on the back. And then this one, as I said, has the 5-foot bed. That kind of goes in line with more of the competition. Ford's being relatively simple with the bed configurations and the cab configurations. There is no two-door regular cab in the US market. You either have the Super Cab or this longer crew cab version. Now, looking at the back of the truck, you can see I like how Ford kind of spells out the Ranger name here. They took a page out of the F-150 there. You have this very large Ford badge with the rear backup camera, which is standard. And then, of course, all Rangers will be an EcoBoost 4-cylinder engine, which we'll talk about under the hood in just a moment. Now, back here, again, the bumper, I like how it's a different color. It's a painted bumper, but it's kind of a gray with these well-integrated parking sensors. And then the exhaust is kind of hidden down there in typical pickup truck fashion. It needs to stay out of the way because this is, again, the off-road version. This truck, in general, offers about 8.9 inches of ground clearance, which is pretty competitive, but not quite as much as what you get in the Tacoma or the Gladiator. Now, the bed, you can see, the one thing I don't like It's not a damped tailgate. I was really surprised by that because most competitors are going to that option, but you can see here the bed, Ford says, has around 44 cubic feet of actual space. This one has the spray and bed liner for like another $500 with the Ford embroidered into the front of the bed liner. It's a very useful bed, much more useful than what you're gonna get in something like the new Jeep Gladiator because it's a very deep bed and offers a good amount of space. I imagine most of you who have the shorter bed configuration may get a pickup bed extender because at 5 feet, it's a little bit on the smaller side. So let's move on to the inside of the new Ranger. The first thing I want to talk about here is the key fob for the vehicle. This XLT trim just kind of has Ford's older switchblade style key. If you guys are looking for intelligent access key with push button start, you have to go to a Lariat trim, which is another reason why you should just spend another couple grand to get the Lariat trim. Now, if you want to activate the remote start, just push the lock button, or double tap that button there. The truck will start right up for you. Or if you want to shut off the engine, just double tap that same button and it'll shut off the engine for you. Now, because it doesn't have push button start, there's no button on the outside of the handle. You have to actually use the button on the fob. But once you open up the door and look at the inside of the Ranger, it's a very familiar environment. For a truck that's been gone for the last 8 years, I kind of look at this and I see the steering wheel from the current generation Ford Explorer, not even the new one. Its dashboard looks like it was taken out of like a Fusion and a Focus, right down to the gauges. And the seats, these are just the cloth seats with an 8-way power adjustment because I have the 302A upgrade package. The cloth itself feels a little bit on the scratchy side, but I do like the fact that it has a leather-wrapped steering wheel. Now, getting into this truck, my tester doesn't have any running boards, so it has 8.9 inches of ground clearance, which does require shorter people like myself to kind of step in a little bit higher, but shutting the door, it actually doesn't sound very solid to me. It's a little bit hollow sounding, and I also feel the structure shaking when I shut it. So again, this is an old truck in other parts of the world, and Ford is going to be working on a new Ranger soon. Now, when you want to start the vehicle up, switchblade key, as I said, stick the key in this ignition here and turn it like a regular key. And then the vehicle starts right up for you. Now you can see, or you can hear the engine. It's a 4-cylinder. This is one of the few, actually it's the only turbocharged 4-cylinder in the truck segment, and it's the Ranger's only engine. Now keep in mind, the Chevy Colorado and the Canyon do offer a diesel 4-cylinder, but it's a diesel, it's not a gas engine, so it's a little bit different. Now in terms of the dashboard here, you can see it's all hard touch plastic here on this upper portion, which is typically the norm for this segment, but I will say that some competitors like the new Gladiator and the Ridgeline Tacoma do have some soft touch materials on the dashboard, where Ford decided to go with all just hard touch plastic. The grading does feel nice, but it definitely feels on the cheaper end. There is some silver painted plastic trim there on the dashboard, which is nice. The steering wheel, again, is basically lifted off of the current generation Explorer because the new one's not out yet. It does have a tilt and telescoping function, which is definitely nice. The center stack here, you can see, is very basic looking. It's got the Sync 3 infotainment system. It's an 8-inch display, but the graphics are a little bit on the older side. For the infotainment system, I'm not going to talk about this too much in depth because I've shown you their Sync 3 system before. It does have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is nice. You can see here going to the home display. This is the home display right here. You can go to your apps and it'll show all these different sources for you. Audio, you can see, is right there. It's got navigation, embedded nav, which is, again, pretty old school. It's a little slow. You can see I'm going between the different sources and it lags a considerable amount. So just keep that in mind if you guys are looking for the newest infotainment system. This is not necessarily the newest offering, but it will get the job done. But again, it kind of shows off the dated factor. I don't like this big, large bezel here and a sea of plastic. I kind of just wish Ford had gone with a much larger screen here, or even like a tablet style screen like in some of the newer offerings. Now coming to the door panels, you can see here hard touch plastic on the front doors, which is a little disappointing. The window is one touch automatic down and up for the driver's side only. It's not one touch down on any other windows. The window switches also feel a little strange. I've never felt, they just look and feel different than the other Ford products. They feel a little bit cheap. The mirror controls are also on the dashboard here, which is strange. Usually they put them on the door panels and whatnot. Over here, your headlight controls are in the usual spot. You can turn on the bed light from over there. The gauge display, you can see, is just the standard display. If you guys go for a Lariat trim, you'll have the 4.2-inch productivity screens on the side, which is again lifted from the Ford Fusion. The gauges themselves, they look a little bit on the more basic side for this lower trim. You have steering wheel audio controls over here. You have your controls to navigate through this little display right here, whatever you'd like that to show you. My tester does have the technology package that rolls in adaptive cruise control, which is good. It also has lane keeping assist. So features like that are nice. That's kind of what Ford did to modernize this truck a little bit. Looking at the center stack here, you can see it's got dual zone climate control. It's got a power outlet, 2 power outlets over there. It's got 2 USB ports. You can turn off the automatic start-stop there. You can turn on the hill descent control. You can lock the rear diff. That's part of the FX4 off-road package. And then over here you can see is your 4-wheel drive selector switch. It's pretty simple. You literally just push or rotate it to 2 high, 4 low. It's got a traction management mode where you can go to normal, grass, gravel, and snow, mud and ruts, and then sand. So that's part of the FX4 off-road package, which is really good. This is controlling the 10-speed automatic. It does have a sport mode there. It has a manual shifter buttons over here, no paddles on the wheel. If you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see it's got a standard backup camera. It's got parking sensors. It does have trajectory, no 360 camera. I wasn't really expecting that in this particular mid-sized truck segment. I'm surprised to find there's a standard pull type handbrake here. Again, showing the fact that this is an older design. There's good storage over here, which is nice. Good storage over there. This is a little bit padded right here, and then it gives you a pretty deep storage well, which is also good. The seats on my particular one, they are cloth, like I said. I don't find them to be very comfortable. I don't like the scratchy feel, but they do offer a good amount of adjustability. And they hold you in place relatively well for a truck. I just prefer leather. If you guys prefer cloth, you're gonna like this XLT trim. It does give you 3-way heated seats, which is nice with the cloth options. Now, looking at the glove compartment there, you can see it's a pretty good size with the glove compartment. It's damped, but it's not lined with felt. But overall, the Ranger's interior definitely is a little bit of a disappointment. It's comfortable enough. It has a good enough amount of space. It just feels on the older side versus something like the newer Fords, especially since considering this truck has been gone for quite a few years. Now, because I have the crew cab model, you can see the back seat space is definitely much more usable versus the super cab. But the first thing I want to show you before I get back here, just like a lot of other pickups, you can lift up this seat back here. Although I am surprised that it lifts up in one piece. Most other competitors offer a 2-piece setup, so you can have a passenger and lift this up. But you can see it gives you a good amount of storage underneath here, but it's not covered storage or anything special. It's just a good hiding place when you want to keep things away from thieves if you have this thing parked in a bad area. Now, getting into the back seat here, you can see this is probably one of the reasons why compact trucks in general got phased out years ago for full-size trucks, because the space is on the tighter side. Ford says the legroom is around 34 inches back here, which is a lot more than what you get in the super cab, which is like 30 inches. It does have a hump here, which is kind of surprising me, although this is, again, a 4-wheel drive vehicle. You have 2 USB ports over here. A regular household power outlet, no vents. I wasn't expecting that. Ford does throw in 1 map pocket, and then there is a nice little armrest that folds down and gives you 2 cup holders. Now, in terms of the materials, you can see it's hard touch plastic, just like it is on the front seats. But at 5'7", I have pretty good headroom. I have decent legroom. Just know that things like the Honda Ridgeline and the new Jeep Gladiator is going to offer more rear seat space if you guys go for the crew cab configuration. So under the hood of the new Ranger, you're actually going to find a pretty simplified engine lineup. You only get a choice of 1 engine. It's a 2.3-liter 4-cylinder. I know what you're thinking, a 2.3-liter 4-cylinder in a truck. Now, 2.3 is not anything new to the Ranger. The previous generation offered a 2.3 from Mazda for years, and then they finally upgraded to a 2.5. Now, you have to keep in mind that this is their EcoBoost 4-cylinder, so it's essentially the same motor out of the Ford Mustang. It offers 270 horsepower because it's a twin-scroll turbo and a class-leading 310 foot-pounds of torque. So at least Ford put a very good motor with a lot of torque in this vehicle. Now, it doesn't have the highest horsepower in the segment, but when it's paired with that new 10-speed automatic transmission, which is an upgrade over what you got in other markets for the Ranger, it should put down very good power. Now, the Ranger towing capacity, because it's a truck, it is rated to tow up to 7,500 pounds, and Ford quotes that number whether you guys go for the super cab or 2 or 4-wheel drive, or some trucks you have to go like for a shorter cabin 2-wheel drive to get 7,500 pounds. The bed also on this one will carry a maximum of around 1,500 pounds. It'll go up to a max of around 1,700 pounds, depending if you guys go down to the Super Crew configuration. Now, because this is a 4-cylinder, it does get better gas mileage than most of the competition. This one with 4-wheel drive is rated at 20 in the city and 24 on the highway. Regular gas is recommended, and the Ranger, because it's a smaller truck in general, weighs a little bit less. This one, as it sits, weighs around 4,460 pounds. So let's get out on the road and see how this truck actually performs. So first, setting off in the all-new Ranger, I'm on this little dirt road here, just trying to get back to the main road. And you really notice with the FX4 off-road package, which includes the special shocks, it includes the terrain management system, includes skid plates, includes unique wheels. This truck feels very refined. It has a very controlled ride to it. It feels relatively stiff as well, even though this chassis is very old. But in general, it makes a pretty decent first impression, so I'm relatively happy with the Ranger feels. I also like the smaller size of this truck. It's not quite as big as an F-150, so if you're going to take it off-roading, it's actually a lot easier to do so. Now, as you heard, start-stop is going to be included, and you can shut it off from this button down here at the center console when you lift off the brake. The engine's pretty quick to start up, so I'm pretty happy about that. It also has a hill hold feature. And I'm on a little bit of gravel road there, but I'm going to put it here into its two-wheel drive setting, and we'll put it into sport. And let's put our foot down and see how it feels. Very interesting sound. I mean, remember, this is a 2.3 liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder, it's a twin scroll turbo. And Ford honestly does a really good job with this engine. It feels pretty quick. This feels a lot faster than the last Tacoma that I drove with the 3.5 liter V6 and 6-speed automatic. It's a relatively nice sounding engine as well. You can hear Ford is kind of piping in a little bit of induction noise to this vehicle. Now, in terms of the acceleration and the transmission, I do find that the 10-speed is a little bit sluggish to respond from time to time. It does shift okay when it's in its sports setting, but when it's normal mode, it feels a little lethargic, which is a little confusing to me because it's got so many gears. Ford just needs to kind of work on the programming a little bit. I find that the transmission can get a little confused. It's kind of searching around its top gear from time to time, and I really just want it to be a lot more responsive. But other than that, the handling of this truck is fine. It's got, you know, decent steering. It's very truck-like with its steering. It feels a little bit on the slower end. The body will lean considerably from time to time. So it's a truck. I wasn't expecting it to be super sporty, especially with the off-X4, off-road package that this one has. But visibility is also pretty good. You can see around the truck pretty well. It's a small truck, so it's very nice in that sense, where you can kind of see around things very easily. The seats also, I think they're relatively comfortable. But I wish that they're leather. That's kind of a preference that I have in mind. They hold you in place okay, but the fabric to me just feels a little bit on the cheaper, scratchier side. In terms of noise, at highway speeds, there's a good amount of wind noise coming in, which is pretty typical of a truck. The engine just sounds strange, but God, it's got so much torque, so much delicious torque, which is something that the V6s, the naturally aspirated V6s, kind of lack. So even though this thing is down on horsepower compared to some of the competition, it does feel relatively strong. 0 to 60 times, like I said, are around just under 7 seconds. So it is a little bit better than what you're going to get in some of the competition. But it's strange that Ford doesn't offer an upgraded engine. I'd be curious to see how this thing feels if you were towing, a 7,000 pound trailer behind it. That's kind of a concern of mine. It just doesn't feel very big. This truck feels also narrow, even though they made it significantly wider than the previous generation Ranger. It doesn't feel quite as, big as some of the competition, which some of you are going to like. So if you're looking for a truck that feels a little bit smaller, the Ranger may be the one for you because it does feel smaller than some of the competition. See, in terms of lag, the engine also doesn't really have much in terms of turbo lag, and it surprisingly will keep pulling all the way to its 6,000 RPM. So this is definitely a nice engine. The engine in this truck is so memorable for me for all of the torque. The sound isn't all that impressive. The transmission needs a little bit of work, but I think the other brands could easily learn from Ford by putting a 4-cylinder turbo with all of this torque, because it really helps with the acceleration and the feel of this truck. If you guys are actually planning to do mostly daily driving, I just would be curious to know how this thing feels when you are towing something that's very heavy. So throughout the Ranger's long lifespan in the Ford lineup, this was a vehicle that was at one point one of the company's top sellers, with Ford moving around 250,000 of these annually back in the early 2000 era. So when they decided to kill off the Ranger name, they essentially gave all those sales to Toyota, since Toyota moves around 250,000 Tacomas every year. So after an 8-year hiatus, how does the new Ranger stack up in this ever-competitive compact to mid-sized truck segment? Well, I'm happy to report that the new Ranger is definitely a modern interpretation of what a Ranger should be. I'm just just not entirely sure that Ford has moved the needle far enough to make this thing stand out. The only thing for me that really stood out is its engine. The 2.3 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder is the only turbocharged 4-cylinder in the segment, and it makes the most torque, which is really great for acceleration. But the 10-speed automatic, I still have a few issues with it, just like I complained about in the F-150 and in the Mustang. It just shifts a little too lethargically. It gets caught up big in its top gear all the time. Now, thankfully, the Ranger does feel like a modern truck because it rides and handles nicely. It has a more car-like feel versus some of the other trucks in the segment. And its interior, while it is on the cramped side, does have some nice elements like the Ford Copilot 360. It's got the Sync 3 infotainment system, but at the same time, it just feels old. It feels like it was pulled directly out of a Ford Fusion, which is going to be discontinued for the 2019 model year. Now, with all that said, if you guys are looking to purchase a Ranger, what's it going to cost? Well, the old Ranger a lot less expensive versus this new version. And really the problem with the compact truck segment is the fact that these are getting pretty expensive. This new Ranger starts at around $24,300 for the base Super Cab model. Now keep in mind, it is a couple thousand more than the Toyota Tacoma because Toyota offers the two-door configuration where Ford doesn't offer a two-door Super Cab model. They only offer just the Super Cab with the half doors or the Super Crew like this one, and only just a choice of either a 6-foot or a 5-foot bed. So that is going to limit the options for a lot of people who are looking for a truck. Now, if you guys want four-wheel drive, it's a whopping $4,000 more. If you want the Super Crew configuration, it's about $2,000 more. So this XLT version starts at around $34,100. Before options, my tester has a 302A upgrade package for $2,800. The FX4 off-road package is $1,300. The wheels are like another $800 and whatnot. This one, as it sits, stickers for around $41,590, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, although I don't like the fact that it has halogen headlights and cloth seats. Keep in mind, if you guys go for a fully loaded Lariat, those are going to go around $48,000 with all the trimmings, like with leather and stuff like that, with LED headlights, which does make the Ranger a little bit more expensive than something like a Tacoma that's fully loaded, but it's around the same price as something like a Chevy Colorado or GMC Canyon, and way less expensive than the all-new Jeep Gladiator. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2019 Ford Ranger XLT. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.